The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Karen, the Director of Education and Support here at the Adult Family Home Council. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar today. We are very fortunate to have a couple of leaders in their field to talk with us today, Joshua Bam and Neil Taylor from Gravis Law, PLLC. They are going to talk to us about ownership strategies and entity selections. So before they get started, I'd like to just kind of go over a couple of things like I do at the beginning of every webinar, just to let you know how you will get your continuing education credit. So there's going to be one CE offered for this presentation, and those will be emailed. The CE certificates will be emailed out to the email address that you use to register for this webinar. So, and those will be going out approximately 1 week after this webinar. So keep a lookout for those, and just check your junk mailbox in case it might go there. So if you don't see it within a week, okay? Or you can always give us a call here at the Adult Family Home Council. So with that said, I will go ahead and turn it on over to Josh and Neil. And thanks, gentlemen, for being here once again.
Thank you, Karen.
It's our pleasure. My name is Neil Taylor. I'm the managing attorney for the commercial transactions team of Gravis Law. We are a regional firm going national. We have 61 employees in 9 different offices, including one in Olympia, one in Seattle, and Richland, the Tri-Cities, and other places. Josh Bam is the star of today's show. He's our practice area lead for the adult family homes. He's also our practice area lead for securities, and he's our practice area lead for cannabis and alcohol licensing, which is not really related to this, but on the other hand, the cannabis area in terms of medical marijuana and so forth actually could bring on some questions from all of you. And feel free to ask them because Josh is quite expert in all of the licensing around all of that. The one thing we'd like to make sure that you do is please send us your questions as you go, as you think of them. We will look at your questions and we will respond to them in the course of doing the presentation. Don't feel a need to hold your questions, and we might batch them together and take similar ones and put them together and give a response, and then feel free to interact with us as we do that. So whatever we can do to make this a positive experience for you, that's what we intend to do. So also give us your suggestions as we go. Josh?
Thanks, Neil. Thank you for joining us today. So I am Josh Bam, attorney with Gravis Law. I've been working with adult family homes for many years, previously in Seattle, but now in Tri-Cities, Washington, and Olympia, and sort of all over the Pacific Northwest and on the East Coast as well. Today we're going to talk about the fun stuff in adult family homes, which is entity selection, working to achieve tax benefits, and really making sure that your assets are protected as you move forward in your adult family home business. We're not going to talk about regulation and compliance. I think everybody probably gets enough of that. So just to begin, we're going to provide a brief overview of the forms of doing business. So if you're going out an adult family home, either you're potentially one person who's caring for a relative, or maybe you're one or a couple of people in a business with a home caring for maybe up to 6 residents. We're going to talk about both of those situations today. So if you have questions that are specific about one individual caring for a relative or caring for a group of residents, let us know and we'll be sure to address that specifically.
And also, if there's anybody in the audience that's part of an organization that's larger than that has a multitude, multiple homes, and are looking to raise money and so forth, then that's when our expertise on securities and the like can also be useful for you.
So today we're chatting from Richland, Washington, in Tri-Cities, and we're just going to talk a little bit about how these business entities work before we get specifically into tax benefits and what kind of entity selection might make the most sense in the adult family home. situation. Today we are going to talk about the top row here, which basically are limited liability businesses. That means that if you enter into one of these businesses, like for example, you form a limited liability company, you personally may not be liable, usually won't be liable for any of the debts or obligations of that limited liability company. I say you usually won't be liable because, of course, if you commit fraud or misrepresentation, you're always going to be liable for that. But if you're doing good business, this top row of entities here, the corporation, the limited liability company, these entities will basically protect you and your home and your car and your retirement accounts and your personal savings from liability, so long as you're doing good ordinary business. The bottom row are basically companies. Sorry, let's move back here quickly. The bottom row here is entities that are not limited liability companies. This is going to subject you to potential personal liability. So basically what that means is a sole proprietorship would be one person going out into the world and doing business in their own name, signing deals in their own name, conducting all of their operations, paying taxes in their own name. I personally think that this is risky because when business is in your own name and something happens in that business, you would be personally liable for anything that goes on. If somebody slips and falls, if there's tax issues, if somebody thinks that you've done somebody to somebody in the home, or if there's maybe fiduciary duty issues, all of that stuff you could be personally liable for. As an attorney who wants to guard against risk, that's terrifying. So my default response is let's get people into limited liability. It's important to protect the things that they've worked for, like their savings account and their retirement. So this top row here is pretty important. Just want to make sure that we don't have any questions here. I think that there are a couple of questions, but we may address them a little bit later. They're kind of specific. So let's just move quickly to some of the key elements of the adult family home. I think that one of the key elements of an adult family home is getting tax benefits. You're caring for people, you're receiving income, and if you can exclude those from taxes, that's really a pretty big benefit. So when we're talking about business entities here, there's basically two types of taxation. The first one, if you're a limited liability company, for example, or a partnership, just a default partnership, you're going to have pass-through taxation. Basically what that means is that you're going to receive income. It's going to pass through this business here straight to the owner. And the owner of the business is actually the one who's going to pay those taxes. And that's called pass-through taxation because it passes through the business. In an adult family home, this pass-through taxation is critical to receiving tax benefits. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're mostly going to talk about pass-through taxation today because it's a key element in doing business here. That may not be the case for you if you're a major corporation who has adult family homes or long care facilities with like 50 patients. This is not going to apply. This is not going to apply to you. You can pick whichever taxation method you prefer. But if you're an adult family home who's got 6 or less patients, residents, then you could be subject to some of those tax benefits, and you might want to consider having pass-through taxation. I think that pass-through taxation works best in an LLC. You can receive these tax benefits as a sole proprietorship too, but again, that comes with some risk. So as long as we have pass-through taxation, we can get some of the tax benefits of the adult family home. This is just corporate taxation for reference. I think that it's sort of good to know what the other side looks like, but basically corporate taxation is receiving income. It goes to the corporation, and the corporation pays tax to the government. When the corporation distributes money to its shareholders, then those shareholders will pay tax on the money they received. But this is basically double taxation, is what corporate taxation amounts to. One, the company pays tax. Two, the shareholder pays tax. There's ways around double taxation. if you're doing business as a sole proprietor or maybe like a couple of people, and you're doing business as a corporation just as one or two people, there are ways to avoid double taxation, but this corporate taxation is not going to give us the tax benefits that we want. And those tax benefits sometimes, if you're taking care of 4 to 5 residents or one resident, are really key here. So let's move on here to the benefits of taxation in the adult family home realm. First, let me just take a quick look at some questions. So someone was asking if we're looking at an LLC, and we'll talk more about the benefits of an LLC and how they work in a little bit. Someone says, if we're trying to work on an LLC, can we do that by ourselves, or do we need to have an attorney do it for us? That is an excellent question. Technically, yes, you can do it yourself. You can go to the Washington Secretary of State website and file for your LLC, and you can get an EIN, and you can do your business licensing and your LLC agreements, make sure everything works well together, get your city licensing. If you haven't gone through this process before, it's difficult. And if you check the wrong box, it might make you start over, depending on where you are in the process. And if there's a step that you skip, you might have to go back at some later time and correct it. So what I'm finding is that we get really good clients from people who've used LegalZoom, or people who have tried to do it themselves, because we find ourselves on the back end trying to fix things moving forward. And unfortunately, sometimes that's more expensive than doing it right the first time. You can do it yourself. If you feel confident and you've done it before, I think that makes sense. If you're a new business owner and you're just starting, we can be involved in lots of ways, whether it's to explain what the process looks like and what kind of information and steps are required, or to just get it done for you so that you can focus on running the business. So the short answer is yes, you can do it yourself if you feel comfortable doing it. And then hopefully you're not coming to see us on the back end, but we'll be ready. We do help people move from sole proprietorships to LLCs. This is actually really not that hard. It depends on what kind of business you're running. When we talk about LLCs here in a little bit, we'll talk about putting the home in an LLC, and what that may look like depending on how many residents you have and what other assets might want to go in that LLC to protect you from liability. But yes, if you're a sole proprietorship and you think maybe I do want to be a limited liability company, that's definitely something that's possible. I just want to move on quickly here to some of the tax benefits of being an adult family home. So first here we have this wonderful Internal Revenue Bulletin 2014-7. And basically what the Internal Revenue Service said was, if you're receiving qualified Medicaid payments for providing care for a resident, you could exclude that from income. In fact, now you have to exclude that from income. And so you don't have to pay tax on that money. So there are some rules here. As you can see, one, you have to have pass-through taxation, which we talked about. The other ones are you have to live in the home with those residents. And two, that income exclusion only applies to 5 residents. So in Washington State, you can have an adult family home with 6 residents, but that 6th resident is not going to qualify for that income exclusion. And so you would have to pay tax on the income received, even if it's from Medicaid, for that 6th resident. So when we're setting up adult family homes, what we like to do is plan for this tax benefit. Do you want to have a maximum of 5 residents? And what that looks like? Will somebody be living in the home? Here's exactly, we can help people file their taxes. We can show them how it fits on Form 1040 and how it's excluded on which line. And so we really help plan that whole process from formation to getting that tax benefit to just continuing doing business. So obviously there's some licensing considerations for adult family homes as well. We're not going to touch on that today. And of course there's the union. SEIU, I think, is something everyone's aware of. But if you want to know more about the union or anything, let us know as well. So somebody asked quickly, does it apply only to the Medicaid payment or to client's participation as well? So this is a really good question. So we're just going to talk here quickly about the tax benefit exclusion and what exactly that might mean in terms of a calculation. So it's tax benefits for owners, it's 5 residents, and it's for difficulty of care payments. That's the part of the income that you can exclude. When you receive qualified income from Medicaid for difficulty of care payments, and you'll probably be able to see that on a Form 1099 at the end of the year, but that amount is probably going to be excluded from income. And I have to say probably because I haven't seen everybody's taxes or business entities or what that looks like. But the general rule is that'll probably be excluded from income. So if you have 5 residents, that qualified Medicaid payment can be excluded from income. That includes administrative costs. So if you're having trouble figuring out what's for care and what's for administrative costs, but that money's from Medicaid, exclude it. You're going to see it on that Form 1099. It should be pretty easy to identify, and we can help identify it as well. If you're getting some Medicaid and some private pay, this is only for Medicaid payments. So private pay cannot be excluded from income. That's just an unfortunate fact of life. That's just regular income. So what the purpose here is that the government doesn't want to pay out Medicaid payments and then have taxes come in for its own tax payments out. But if you're getting private pay and you're making income on that, the government probably does want some tax money from it, unfortunately. In Washington State, you may also want to go get a business license. I think that that's a really good idea in general. For taxes, there's an exclusion for adult family homes. There's some specific requirements for that exclusion. And we can talk about it specifically if you're filing or worried about state taxes. But it's usually applicable to adult family homes. And I say usually applicable because RCW 70-128, that's the statute for family homes. And it's covered by that exclusion language there in the Washington Administrative Code. So if you're filing for state taxes or if you're having trouble figuring out what exclusions might apply for you regarding the Department of Revenue, let us know because we can help detail that for you as well. If you are a single person providing care for a family member, and that's your sole job, there's a downside to excluding income. To qualify later for retirement or Social Security disability benefits, you're going to need some kind of income in your life. So that's going to be like Social Security or FICA payments. You're going to have to fund those accounts for yourself. So if your sole job is providing care for your parents and you have to exclude that income, you're probably not building up a retirement account with Social Security, and you may not be able to qualify for some of those things. We have strategies to help people mitigate some of those situations, but that's something that at least I've seen a lot here. With my work with United Way of King County, and so just something to be aware of. It's a benefit, but there can also be some downsides. So for the difficulty of care payments, one of the requirements is that you have to be living in the home. You have to live in the home with the residents. So if you have to be providing the care, you have to be receiving the income, and you have to actually live in the home with the residents. If there's 2 owners and only one lives in the home with the residents, then only that person qualifies for the exclusion from their income. Again, it's all pass-through taxation, so it's pretty easy to apportion who's lived in the home and who hasn't. But unfortunately, that's the rule. So I just want to pause quickly and see if anybody has any questions. I know that we've had some, and hopefully we've been able to answer them. So if you are thinking about, or if you started to work in an adult family home, really the first step is, what are your goals? Is this just care for a parent for a short term? Is this 4 or 5 residents? Or is this care for a family member that might potentially outlive you? And and how that estate planning looks. So we always start from the back end. I want to know what your goals are, what you think the next 3 or 5 years might look like, because we can definitely plan around that. Not only do we want to plan your business to help provide protection, stability, and accelerate really income by providing tax benefits, but we also want to protect your estate, because I think that's what good attorneys should do. So just a quick question here. Someone says that they have a resident that's not private pay, but the care is paid for by L&I. Can this be excluded? It would depend what kind of L&I care that was. I don't think it should be workers' compensation or anything. We just have to look and make sure that it's a Medicaid payment. If it is a Medicaid payment, potentially. So I think that that's something that we would have to look at the exact circumstances of, why that resident is there and what purpose of care that was. Unfortunately, there are some gray areas because the difficulty of care payments is not really well defined. We know that there's a qualified Medicaid payment, but the rest really depends on the type and purpose of the care. So if we're looking at an entity here, we want to, oh, sorry, someone had a quick question. I think that's a kind of a detailed question, which we'll get back to here in a second. So the most popular benefit for, or the most popular choice, I think, for people looking to protect their assets, like their house or their savings, is the limited liability company. That's because the limited liability company is really flexible. You can change its tax status, whereas a sole proprietorship, you cannot change your tax status. You can also create LLC agreements with multiple managers, with multiple owners. It's a really flexible, easy to use entity that provides really good protection. So we like the limited liability company because it's easy to form. You can form it yourself, and it's really easy to work with, and it's really flexible in moving forward.
Yeah, I would say though that it is very complicated. And so doing this yourself, if you're not familiar with all of the nuances and the things that you can change, like how are you taxed? Are you going to be taxed as a sub S corp? Are you going to be taxed as a partnership? Are you going to be taxed as a C corp? And can you change that after a while? Is there a period of time when you might have losses, so you want to be taxed as a partnership? Is there an opportunity to pay some people compensation, and how that is taxed coming out of the entity? So, and how is it managed? Is it managed by the members? Is it managed by managers? Mm-hmm. Do you have officers? So it's not wise to do an LLC on your own, no matter how simple it is. Because no matter how simple it is, it's still complicated.
That is fair. I like the LLC because it's complicated, but it's flexible. Because you can change tax statuses, you can have investors, you get the pass-through taxation for adult family home tax benefits. It protects your house. You could move a house into it. You could have it hold your car title. It's just really easy to use, and it's easy for us to use. What's really nice about an LLC, occasionally in smaller family-run adult family homes, is you could pass things to your relatives through an LLC. So if you wanted your house to carry on, you didn't want title to be interrupted, you wanted your car to carry on without interrupting title, or you wanted to fund your relatives with some amount of money to carry on that care, the LLC is the way to go.
Yeah.
So that's why people like the LLC. I think that we have probably the most common entity that we see is the sole proprietor because it's the easiest. So I see this a lot in adult family homes that are smaller, because you don't have to register it. You could potentially get away with out licensing, and so it's pretty under the radar.
But you're asking for disaster.
Yeah.
And this is a highly regulated industry. Mm-hmm. The chances of having some kind of claim against you is significant. So we really advocate making sure that you get into a limited liability company. On the exception, get into a C corp. But that would be an exception usually for a larger business that's trying to raise money. or has really complex ownership that doesn't fit in an LLC. But for the most part, the limited liability company is the most popular entity for any kind of business, and it certainly applies for adult family homes.
So I think some of the things that I always say is, the sole proprietorship is just not a good form for doing serious long-term business. If you're going to go mow lawns over the summer for 3 months or something, that may work. But the problem with the sole proprietorship is that it opens you up not only to your own liability, but obviously to spouse liability as well.
By the way, even for mowing lawns,
I know.
don't do a sole proprietorship.
Well, I know. That's
the
true.
lawnmower kicks a rock and hits somebody in the head.
True. That's true. It's just not worth the cost.
Yeah.
I know. It's true. And there's no tax flexibility with a sole proprietorship. You can't make a tax election for yourself. You're an individual. You can't have investors. No one can invest in you, like to own shares of it. It's a pretty limited vehicle, but it's easy to use. And so I think that's why we find it happening a lot. So I think that if you're looking here and you're maybe not going to have just four or three.
By the way, Josh, one thing, I don't want to harp on this too much, but I don't think I can harp on this too much. You got to get into a limited liability situation. So if you are a sole proprietor, get out of that situation. Even if you do a do-it-yourself LLC formation, form an LLC.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that really is good advice. I can't really think of a good legitimate reason not to have an LLC.
No.
Yeah, we tried hard, but it's just not there. If you're not dealing in 4 or 5 residents, maybe you're not dealing in family care, but you're dealing in 10 residents, then I think it could be good to consider a planned option. If this tax benefit has no impact on you, you don't really care about this tax exclusion at all because you're running a much bigger business and you're getting tax deductions and other things other ways. It could be good to potentially think about an S corporation or a C corporation, and we'll talk about both of those. But the S corporation will basically, there's a benefit there because if you're not claiming any adult family home tax deduction, you're going to have a pretty significant gross income. The S corporation will allow you to take salary out of that gross income and all the expenses, and then whatever's left over is just ordinary income not subject to self-employment tax. And so that can result in significant tax savings. So if we're working with somebody who's maybe providing like in-home care or like doing like nurse stations out or contract care that doesn't qualify as a qualified care payment, an S corporation is probably going to be a much better option. If you're not getting a tax benefit, you should at least be allowed to deduct your own salary, and then the rest is not subject to self-employment tax. So we like that one a lot. It's an LLC. It's really easy to do. This one, I would say you should probably have at least an accountant on. I would say you could just have an attorney on it, but I think just having an attorney on it would be great. If you just have an accountant on it, just be careful because there's a lot of small steps here with the creation of a limited liability company and then going with the IRS and actually filing a tax election. So we can help with that, but there's some intricacies in making sure that it really is going to qualify for this S corporation election, which is pretty beneficial. If you are going to go and form an LLC through an attorney, it's not really that expensive. We charge $1,500 as a flat fee, which covers the formation, the licensing, the LLC agreement. We get the EIN. We send everything to you, and occasionally we serve as registered agents for our clients as well. So that you're not getting any of the official bizarre information, that you have somebody dealing with it, you can focus on giving care. I think that's really the important part. We had a question here on a sole proprietor has $1,400, and if Petri, would you mind sending that question again? That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Just so you know, I can't read it. It's too small.
Okay. So the C corporation, is here's a question from Daniel before we move on. He asks, at the end of the fiscal year, does the gross income have to be passed on to the members, and each member has a different percentage, or can it stay in the business account? So if we're just talking about a regular LLC, that's not an S corp, a default limited liability company taxation is partnership taxation, which is still passed through. And so if you're just forming an LLC, that's default partnership taxation. At the end of the year, the gross income from that LLC, you'll take some deductions above the line. That means that the entity itself will get some deductions for things and expenses that are paid, like marketing or licensing fees. And then whatever's left over will be split among the members according to their percentage. In a default regular LLC, the membership could be totally different percentages. One person could own 10%, one person could own 90%.
Yeah, and you can keep the money in the LLC, but you're still going to be allocated income. And so what you'd want to do is make sure that you have an operating agreement that indicates that there would be tax payment distributions made to the members of the LLC that are sufficient for them to at least pay their taxes.
That's right. Yeah, because in an LLC, since it is a pass-through entity, whatever that income is, whether the members get it in cash or not, the members have to pay tax on it. And so that's kind of a critical component. So we always write tax distributions.
It's another element of the operating agreement that is complex and that you've got to do right, or you can find yourself in tax trouble or cash flow problems. You know, it's nothing worse than getting attributed a bunch of income, and the LLC needs to keep the money to fund its operations, and so you got a bunch of non-cash income. And you've got to pay taxes with your own cash. So that's a good example of the kind of thing that you can get into trouble in a do-it-yourself situation.
I agree. So the next, one of the benefits that I really do like about the LLC is being able to transfer it among family. If you're a sole proprietorship, you cannot really transfer anything other than through your estate planning. So there's no real transfer of things there. So let's say you're an LLC and you're a parent and you have a member who is maybe a child or a trust for a child. If something happened to you as a parent, that LLC would continue. All the assets in it would continue. Either the trust would manage the LLC or the child would manage it if the trust was triggered. Maybe they were 18 or 21. If you're a sole proprietorship, transferring things, you could transfer them by trust. You could transfer them by last will and testament. But it's basically just you. So,
that is a really good point, Josh, that you can use an LLC as an estate planning tool. And most people don't think of that, but that's a great point. And it could be a reason to put the title of the home into the LLC. And it is a way to transfer an interest to somebody that is the next generation down, or somebody else that you want to benefit in the long haul.
Yeah, and some of these situations are family, and it's important for family not to have to go through that probate process.
Yes.
Not to have to go and look at that title and have the court go through title in the house and everyone pays all these debts. If you can do it in an LLC and just make it a smooth process, I think there's a lot of value in that.
There is. It's actually expenditure-wise as well. To do a trust and so forth is an expense, a legal expense.
And that's one piece of an estate plan.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense. So the LLC owner, is it okay to give myself salary and put myself on payroll? As an S corp, you're required to give yourself salary and put yourself on payroll, and it's got to be a reasonable salary. If you're just a default partnership, you can still get paid. You can still have guaranteed payments, but it probably wouldn't be salary because you'd be paying self-employment tax at the end of the year. So yes, it's possible. I think it's we'd have to just look at what exactly your specific circumstances are.
What was the question again? Read it to me.
The question is, for an LLC owner, is it okay to pay yourself salary?
Oh.
Put yourself on payroll? Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
you can definitely do that. And as an S corp, it's required. So
Yeah, it gets into tax planning in terms of avoiding the self-employment tax. And if you have multiple owners, then you may want to pay the person that is doing the work a salary, and then pay their Social Security taxes and other taxes out of the LLC, and then anything that's left over can be divided up between the owners however you want.
Yeah. So I just want to address a couple of things quickly. One, if you are an owner of a company and you don't have any employees, you're not required to pay L&I for any of that stuff. Owners can work unlimited hours for free without paying L&I, which is kind of nice. So make your employees owners. No, that's not the moral of the story. But that's something to consider too. So you shouldn't be triggering any additional obligations here by just having an LLC and being an owner, unless you're also going to have employees. Unless you go through the LLC formation process and you accidentally click that you want your owners to have all of the insurance benefits, then you would be responsible for all of that stuff. But you shouldn't be clicking that, hopefully. And so, again, having an attorney do some of this stuff might help a little bit. So let's move. So here we're saying, somebody asked if payments received from Medicaid pay clients, are they considered income when you're applying for other state agencies? This is kind of a tough question because every agency has to some extent, its own definition of income. I think, and I can't remember, so don't hold me to this, but the last time I was on the Health Plan Finder in their terms, I think that was 2 years ago, but it was based on taxable income. And so that's what they look at the house. So if you have no taxable income, potentially you could exclude it from the Health Plan Finder's analysis. So we'd have to go look and make sure nothing's changed there. But last time I checked, and again, that was 2 years ago, some of those state agencies, including Health Plan Finder, was based on just taxable income. So planned option 2 is a C corporation. This is if you want to build an empire. You're going to have 10 adult family homes in Washington and 10 in Oregon. And you're going to have investors. You're going to buy land. You're going to buy a lot of pieces of land. So a C corporation is definitely a planned option. It may not really be a good fit in the adult family home case unless you're really going to go national. So a C corporation comes with all of the fun benefits of building big. You can have investors. It's easy to make employee stock option plans.
You can have institutional investors, whereas in an S corporation, you cannot. If you have an LLC that's being taxed as an S corporation, you cannot have institutional investors either. So if you want to go big, you've got to go with the C corp, and then you get venture capitalists or private equity firms to invest, and that's really the purpose of C corp. And then you have preferred stock.
Yeah.
You have more than one class of stock, which you can't have in an S corp either. So that you can have preferred stock issuances and do Reg D filings, et cetera, and raise money. So that's the purpose of a C corp. Let us know by sending in a comment if there's anybody in the audience that is in a business that is large enough to do C corp. Yeah, please just let us know. Just since we can't see you, we can't ask you to raise your hands.
And I know that this is tax season. I think we're getting close to the end here. So if you have a question about how this income affects your 1040 form, where the amount in the 1099 form should go and where it should be excluded, please feel free to send those questions to us as well. I really love doing tax forms, so I'd appreciate anything you can send this way. So the C corporation, I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about this double taxation myth, because it's a myth I think that's worth dispelling quickly. The C corporation is not going to give you those good tax benefits, so we don't like to use it a lot. but it's possible to avoid double taxation by taking as a salary almost all of the income of the corporation. The C corporation is not subject to the salary rules of the S corp, so your salary at a C corporation could be everything. It could be $1 million one year and $4 million the next year, and there's no double tax on that. You just have to pay employment tax on it all.
Yeah.
But there's limits to even that.
Yeah, the double taxation only comes in when you have a complex ownership structure. You have some people that are participants in the business and some people that aren't.
Mm-hmm.
It is a myth in a situation where you have a single or a couple of people that are doing all the work, and they can take it out as salary.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the corporation pays the Social Security tax and everything else. You're getting the benefits that you could pass up by
and
not
Social Security
taking
tax
income.
has a limit, and
Yeah.
So I do think it's kind of a myth, but it's based on situations.
Yeah.
The other thing is the partnership. You can go out there and with just two people go and do business. You can file with the state for limited liability for the two of you, but you can go and just be like two people doing business together. We generally see this maybe in real estate. We don't see this a lot anymore, really, because you can make a limited liability company that's easy to form, that has really flexible rules. And so I just don't see the partnership anymore. But if you are operating an adult family home with one other person, the court's going to find you to be a general partnership, and you will both be liable for any of the other person's liabilities or faults or mistakes to the fullest extent. And so if people do go do business together, they usually just register a limited liability company. And that's what I recommend as well.
Yeah, the key point there is that a partnership does not limit your liability as an individual. That's why the Limited Liability Act was put in place throughout the country. Was to take the benefits of a partnership, which is the ability to have pass-through taxation, and the ability to have a flexible way to allocate interests and who gets how much of what.
That's right.
It's completely a matter of contract. As in a corporation, you have rules and regulations about shareholders and what they can get and employees and so forth. In a limited liability company situation, you have the flexibility of a partnership to say, well, this partner is going to put in this much money, and this partner is going to put in this much, and this partner is going to get all of the losses to the extent there are losses, and this partner is going to get all the profits to the extent there are profits. You can, by contract, be completely flexible in the way that you allocate things, and you have the limitation of liability. So you keep your personal assets protected.
Yeah. That's why it's my favorite thing.
Nobody does partnerships anymore.
So let's move. I just want to talk at least 1 minute about business alliances, because I think that this is probably little used, but actually has a lot of value in it. And I think this is where Neil spends a lot of his time too.
Yeah, business alliances, I think, again, we don't really have the opportunity to ask you guys questions and find out what kind of situation you're in. So I'm not sure how beneficial a discussion of business alliances is, but there are ways to make additional income. And a business alliance is just a contract you can form with another business, maybe somebody that is, if you have a home that has several people in it, maybe there's somebody who wants to sell their service to that home. Maybe there's a relationship you can develop to generate some additional income. And so, I have specialized in business alliances, and they're a great tool to use to increase your income without creating any additional liability on your part. Yeah,
it'd be great to have like a masseuse come in once a week, or
that's right. That's a good example, Josh.
Yeah, and bring people.
Is that you could have a business alliance where you have an understanding with a masseuse that you're going to give them all your business, and they're going to give you a percentage of their revenue.
That'd be really interesting. So I think that the last point here quickly, and then we can just move to questions, because I know that this is a lot of dense information. But basically, once you're a business, there may be some special tax considerations. For example, if your house is in one LLC and you're operating a business in another, you could lease to yourself and avoid some of those like property taxes and some of those things in the middle. And so that's why we spend a lot of time on the front end planning an adult family home before we really execute that family home. And make sure that the plan not only fits with the business, but also fits with that person's estate. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I just want to go back here as we talk about the rights of ownership here too. Today I was talking about distributions, and this is really like some of the rights of ownership. But if you're forming an LLC with multiple people, I think that the profit and loss versus cash rule is so crazy, because you're going to be, even as a single person in an LLC, you're going to be responsible to pay taxes on the income of that LLC, whether or not you took cash from the company bank account or not. And so that's definitely something that we plan for first. But I say that it's one of the rights of ownership because it's something that you can delegate among investors or managers or other members. You could say, I will take this much profit allocation and we'll delegate an equal amount of cash, but that means that I get 2 votes. And so planning that LLC, that's where it starts to get complicated. So somebody asked here if an S Corp would be a better way to go if you're not an owner living in the home getting tax benefits. Why would you do that as opposed to forming an LLC? Oh, this is a really good question. So an S Corp is really a tax status. So you could form an LLC, but you basically need an entity to elect that tax status for. So it could be a C corporation or it could be an LLC, and then you file with the IRS for that S election. So if you're not getting that tax benefit, I think having an LLC that's taxed as an S corporation is better because you get to deduct your own salary. So you take, let's say you make $100,000 a year in gross income, and you pay yourself $60,000, which is a good salary potentially for a caregiver, let's say. The rest of that money is not subject to self-employment tax, like in an ordinary LLC. In an ordinary LLC, if you make $100,000 and that's your profit, you're paying taxes, self-employment taxes on that $100,000. So, which
is 15.3%.
Yeah,
right so off the top.
If we can save you 15.3% on $40,000, that I think is a better way to go. It does cost a little bit there in setting up payroll. We can find payroll. I've seen payroll for under $50 a month. And honestly, the hassle of getting a paycheck and knowing that your taxes are already paid, relieving that hassle from going at the end of the year and figuring out what your taxes are, it just makes it a lot easier to maintain moving forward. I think it makes it a lot more hassle-free. So that's why we recommend an S corporation tax status election if you're not getting the tax benefits under the Notice 2014-7.
But remember, it's the S corporation is a tax filing. It's not an entity selection. So you can select to be taxed as an S corporation if you're an LLC. You can do that if you're a C corp.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to just take a little bit of time and hang out and do questions. If anybody has any specific questions, our contact information is also up here. We will not charge you to send us an email. Please send us an email or give us a call. Just let us know what's going on, and maybe we can help figure out a strategy or a question. Yep. We're always around. So let us know how we can help. At this point, we'll probably take some questions if that's okay with Karen. Sounds like it might be. So,
yes, sorry about that. It took me a second to get my mouse to work. So yes, absolutely. It's totally fine with me.
Okay, thanks a lot. So let's see. Somebody asked here, if you are an LLC with a live-in owner and you're renting your home to the business, how is the passive income taxed? The passive income is just going to be income. So we find that that's beneficial if you're working with other personal things, like potentially you have an interest that's not subject to deduction. If you could deduct that on the business side, but you wouldn't be able to deduct it on your Schedule A on your personal side, there may be a benefit there. So the lease back to yourself is specific, and there are some things that we look for. We work with CPAs to do that kind of analysis, so that we can provide a legal and financial analysis that really does make sense. So usually we work with I Love Tax, which is located just right around the block here. So I think if you're looking at something that is a leaseback or something that may be a complex transaction, let's plan it first and make sure that you can get that benefit. But that kind of stuff does exist. So somebody asked, can caregivers be paid on a 1099? If you're an individual caregiver and you're caring for a relative, you hopefully will get some kind of statement from DSHS saying that you have a 1099 independent contractor amount, and this is how much you were paid for the year. Hopefully you're not getting a W-2 or anything. We've seen some of that stuff. But if you're an individual caregiver for a family member and DSHS is paying you for that, then you should be getting a 1099 form for your taxes. If you don't get a 1099 form and you know you still had some kind of income, even if you're going to be excluding it, you should still be filing. And so I think that you should still be filing your taxes on that income and excluding it as well. If you have employees, your employees will be paid on W-2s. So if you are working in a bigger adult family home facility where you're an owner and you also have employees, your employees will not be excluding that income on their taxes because they're employees. They have to be live-in owners, but they should be getting W-2s. So how do you get cash from that's a little bit of a complicated question, I think. If you don't mind rephrasing that regarding cash from the S-Corp. It's retained earnings. That could mean a couple of things, so I just want to make sure I'm answering the right question. Just make sure that So somebody asked about taking deductions when you live in the home and operate your business there, and asking maybe when you sell the home or sell the business. If you don't mind just clarifying what exactly that question was there, we'll make sure. Or feel free to send us an email, and we can get a detailed written response to you as well. Otherwise, I think we'll probably just hang out for another 5 minutes or so if anybody has questions. But thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope it helped a little bit. Feel free to follow up with us anytime.
Oh, perfect. I thank you guys so much. I think this has been very, very helpful to a lot of people. And I know that I'm sure that you'll probably get a lot of follow-up emails as well. And like you said, I mean, if you're willing to stay here for a few more minutes, that's perfect. While we're waiting, I'll go ahead and remind everybody that your continuing education certificates will be emailed out to you within approximately 1 week of this webinar. So hang tight for those. And other than that, it looks like we've got a lot of thank yous and people saying how much they've appreciated the information.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Someone asked if I file for an S-Corp, can I deduct only one of the governing official's salary? No, you should deduct everybody on payroll. You should put all all the owners on payroll, all the employees should be on payroll. If we're talking about accelerating business value and really protecting your business, I would say put everybody on payroll. Deduct as much as you can because it's stuff that you're really paying. Whatever is left over, that should be yours without self-employment taxes.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is that don't pay any more than you need to, so that you can take money out without paying the self-employment tax.
That's right. So for the owners, I think that the salary should be the minimum amount possible to be reasonable.
Yeah.
Because we want to make sure that the salaries are small and that whatever is not subject to employment tax, self-employment tax, is really big. Yes. That's a good point. Thanks, Neil. We can recommend some folks in Vancouver. If you wouldn't mind just sending us a quick email, we can send some of that stuff over as well.
And we have an office in Olympia, so that we have folks that can help you there as well.
Maybe Vancouver, Canada. But
Vancouver,
hopefully it's
Canada.
Vancouver, Washington.
Yeah, Vancouver, Canada would be a different kettle of fish.
So this says if you're taking care of 6 residents and you live in the home, then you would be 7. And then how do you take that deduction for bills? So I think what we're talking about here is a tax allocation for potential like expenses for the home, so like utility payments, rent, all those kinds of things. We're asking how to deduct that if you're a live-in person in that home and using those facilities as well. I'll say one thing makes it a lot clearer is if you have an LLC and you're able to segregate that. It's pretty easy to say I live in this one room and the rest belongs to the LLC, and this room is 400 square feet out of 1,000 square feet, although that would be ridiculous. And so the other thing that I like about the LLC is it makes actually administering your business easier. But if I was a sole proprietorship and I was working in that tax situation, generally what your tax advisor, we're not tax advisors, we're just attorneys, what your tax advisor might say is that you should take a look and see what space is reserved for personal use, what space is available for personal and business use, and what space is reserved for strictly business use. And when you find that percentage should be applied across all of your utilities and mortgage payments and rent payments. That's usually how Schedule E works, corresponding with the 1040 form, but your CPA might be able to know a little bit more. But I would apportion it based on square footage and apply that ratio. So somebody asked here, I live in my home. I have a paid caregiver on payroll. If I decide to move into another home, can income still be excluded with another qualified family member and caregiver living in the home? So I think that could be a little bit of a complicated question, but the payments will apply so long as there is a caregiver and a resident there who's receiving qualified Medicaid payments. Now, the process has to be done for each individual family member or care relationship. So you can't transfer care relationships. If that was the question, that person would have to apply for those payments again unless they already had them. If the caregiver has gone through training and is able to provide care, it would be pretty easy to transfer another resident into that home, resident family member. But please feel free to send us a follow-up email if we need to clarify that question or help with anything if you're thinking about a move.
I think that's a wrap.
Okay, yeah, it looks like we have actually just kind of come to the end of our time. There was one more question that says, if I have a commercial loan, what about that? I'm not sure if you need more information about that too.
I think I know what that's talking about. Probably a due on sale clause, maybe like a mortgage or something. But feel free to send us an email. We can definitely follow up.
Yeah, we would need more information.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, perfect, gentlemen. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time and just offering this great information to people. I know that it's going to be beneficial to many. So once again, thanks, and we will see you next time.
All right,
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Bye now.